Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. By now, many of you have probably seen or at least heard about this video showing two Miami Beach police detectives showing up at the home of Raquel Pacheco, a former state Senate candidate and community activist who had written a critical post on Facebook about Miami Beach Mayor Steve Miner.
Is that your account?
I refuse to answer questions without my lawyer present, so I really don't know how to answer that question either
well,
way.
like I said, you're not going to jail.
This is freedom of speech. This is America, right?
And
Veteran.
And I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
Now, at that point, you would have thought the detectives would have backed off. After all, she made it clear she didn't want to answer their questions, and she invoked her right to have an attorney present. But they pressed forward anyway, with one of the detectives reading her Facebook post to her.
Verbatim, it says the guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians tried to shut down a theater for showing a movie that hurt his feelings and refuses to stand up for the LGBTQ community in any way. Even leaves the room when they vote and on related matters. Wants you to know that you're all welcome. Clown face, clown face, clown face. 3 days ago.
So you don't know if it was you?
I'm not going to answer whether that's me or not.
One of the detectives then warned her that her post could incite others to violence, and she should refrain from posting things like that in the future. The Miami Herald reported the instruction to send police to Pacheco's home came from the mayor's office. But the police chief last week said it was his decision and his decision alone. But as you will hear in a moment, Pacheco isn't buying it. This story has garnered international attention. And when I spoke to Pacheco, I started by asking if she was surprised by the reaction to her video.
I'm very surprised. I'm shocked actually by just how the story has grown legs and taken over. It's made national news and global news, and the reaction from the public is just, overwhelmingly positive, I have to say. It gives me hope.
Talk about that. When you say it gives you hope, why?
Because it's a perfect example of Americans coming together around one issue we can all get behind, which is freedom of speech, the First Amendment, the Constitution. And it's amazing to see people from all different types of political backgrounds, including, extreme GOP MAGAs, reaching out to me personally and saying, hey, I don't agree with you on anything, but on this, I'm with you. So it gives me hope in the sense that it's really good to see Americans just get down to our core values and stand together on issues that really matter. So this gives me a lot of hope for our future.
I mean, but it's got to be tricky waters to navigate for you as well. I know that Laura Loomer has been advocating. I don't know if she reached out. I think James Fishback, who's fairly radical, has reached out. How are you dealing with that when you suddenly find yourself with some folks on the far right who are pretty extreme offering their support to you?
It's tough to navigate. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy because it's a lot to weed through, and I don't have a media team, so I'm doing this all on my own. But I'm pretty adamant about researching people's backgrounds and making sure that I'm not affiliating with people who I don't align with. And the one distinction I make with those folks who do reach out, like Mr. Fishback, is that although we can stand together on this particular issue, there's absolutely nothing else that I align with in terms of his platform. And in fact, he invited me to go up to Tallahassee to do a press conference with him, and I turned it down politely because there's just nothing about his platform that I can morally, politically, or personally align with. So my message is very clear, to these folks, is that please don't conflate my criticism for the Israeli government with any ill feelings towards Jewish people, because I don't harbor those.
I know that the Miami Herald initially reported that the visit came after some contact between the mayor's office and the police chief. The police chief on Miami Beach now denies that. He says that it was his decision and his decision alone to send those detectives, those officers to your door. Do you believe that? Do you believe the chief is being truthful here, that it was completely on him?
I don't believe it, because the initial report came directly from the police department, and it was very clear. The Miami Herald reported on it that the directive came from the mayor's office in the form of an email. We have made a records request for that email, and we have nothing.
They haven't fulfilled your public records request.
They have not.
They haven't responded yet. Okay.
No.
And you're pursuing this, and I know that you have an attorney and are thinking of trying to bring on additional attorneys or bring on a firm to sort of help you. Is the goal here to try to get to the bottom of what took place? What are you hoping to achieve by potentially, I would assume, maybe filing litigation or something along that line? What's your goal here?
Look, the most important thing that I'm looking for is an investigation. I want an investigation to find out if this is a common practice at City Hall, if it's routine for them to peruse Facebook posts and then send out the police knocking on people's doors. I'd like to know how many other doors they've knocked on, or if this is just a one-off here with me, and if I'm just being personally targeted. Additionally, I'd like to see, some legislation put into effect to ensure that these things don't happen to other residents in our city. And lastly, I want to ensure that the police department, who is now accepting full responsibility, or is undergoes the proper training on First Amendment rights and protections, because it appears that they're in need of that.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure which is worse, having the police chief just sort of accept responsibility and to have a police chief who thinks it's okay to send officers to somebody's door because of a Facebook post. That's almost more scary, that the chief law enforcement officer in the city of Miami Beach thinks that that's routine and something he should do.
It's very concerning. It's indeed, it's very concerning that the police chief would act in this manner. I feel confident that our investigation is going to reveal that it was not he who made that decision, and that the directive did in fact come from the mayor's office. And I'm confident that there were other parties involved as well.
I want to go back to the premise that the city of Miami Beach police used to come to your door, which was that your post could be inflammatory and could incite violence against others. How do you respond to that allegation?
It's absolutely false. There's no rational person who can read that statement and walk away from it saying, yes, it incites violence. It absolutely does not incite violence. I've been a vocal critic of this mayor from the time he was elected, starting with his extreme anti-camping ordinances and then evicting people who lived on their boats from the ocean. And it's just been a series like egregious, what I feel like are abuses of power. So I've been very vocal in my criticism. And I've said harsh things before. None of them incite violence of any type. And honestly, Jim, I'm of the opinion that if anyone has incited violence, it is them towards me, because they put a target on my back. They came to my door and labeled me a potential risk to the Jewish community. That is insane. I don't even know what to do with that. It's not just damaging to my character and to my soul as a human being, but also to my safety and my son's safety. I have a 12-year-old son. We live here. And there are some extremists in our community. We saw what happened last year with that gentleman who emptied 17 bullets into a car on 41st Street because he thought there were 2 Palestinians in it. So, I mean, these things, I know I sound a little bit paranoid, but I don't think I'm not thinking I'm being irrational and thinking that now I'm very susceptible to that type of behavior from people extremists that live here that may actually be triggered by this accusation against me.
Well, let me give you a moment. What is your position as it relates to, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, we're talking about Israel. One thing you did say in the Facebook post, the guy who, referring to the mayor, the guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians, tried to shut down a theater for showing a movie that hurt his feelings, and refuses to stand up for the LGBTQ community in any way, even leaves the room when they vote on related matters. Want you to know that you're all welcome here, and then you put 3 clown emojis. The very first part of that sentence, the guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians, to be fair, I don't think he's ever explicitly said death to all Palestinians. He's expressed support for what the state of Israel has done when it comes to Gaza, but I don't think, unless you have other evidence, that he's explicitly called for the death of all Palestinians.
Look, whether he explicitly said that or not, to me, it's neither here nor there, because it's my interpretation of the things I've heard him say over the last couple of years on the dais. He's facing a lawsuit from JVP for shutting off their microphones. He has established free speech zones within our city. And I like to remind Mr. Minor, if you're watching this, the entire United States is a free speech zone. So we don't need your little fences to tell us where we can stand. He's done egregious acts. He said egregious things to members of our Jewish community, calling them anti-Semitic for simply standing up to him and having different opinions. So that's my interpretation of it. If I feel that if you have blind support for the state of Israel and the actions, I mean, this is not my opinion. This is on the world stage. They are facing these charges. Netanyahu is an accused war criminal. I'm not making this up. So that's my interpretation. If you choose to stand in the room with Bibi Netanyahu and take photos with him, which our mayor did, and you are, adamant about expressing your unwavering and blind support for the state of Israel, despite what we're seeing, in my personal opinion, that's what you're calling for.
And the notion that for stating your personal opinion, you get a visit from police, that's where the line gets crossed.
That's where the line gets crossed. Because even though I disagree with Mr. Minor on that particular issue, I would still defend his right to voice his opinion. And so I expect the same in return. I'm a veteran. I served this country for 6 years, and I came from a country that was very oppressive. I grew up in Portugal, where I remember the teachers in school would still hit us. They would still hit the kids if we didn't get the answers right. And when I came to the United States, the first thing that stood out to me was when I walked into that 5th grade classroom and kids were talking back to their teachers. That to me was just so foreign. Like, we would never think to do that in Portugal. But at the same time, it was also the first taste I had of American freedom, where it was like, oh my God, even as a child, I have a voice. And so that's what resonates the most with me as I reflect back to the time I immigrated here as a 10, almost 11-year-old child. And so this notion that I would say something, and the cops, 2 armed police officers, sworn police officers with guns, would show up at my door to verify if it's me. And it just felt like, wow, I keep saying it, but it felt like the First Amendment as I know it and democracy as I know it just died at my front door that day. It just, and the initial reaction for me was just shock. And then I was very angry. And then I spent the whole night crying. I was extremely emotional. It felt like a death, Jim. It felt like a death. It still does.
When we come back, we talk to former Republican State Senator Jeff Brandes about why the governor refuses to actually produce a plan to do something about property taxes. Stay with us.